Welcome to If These Walls Could Talk. I'm your host and super CEO, Lindsay Liu. Joining me today is Bethany Babcock, the founder and principal of Foresite Commercial Real Estate. She founded Foresite 10 years ago, and her company currently manages over 80 shopping centers in Central Texas. With 20 years of experience in property management, leasing, and investment sales, today Bethany is going to share the details of one of the most surprising discoveries she has ever stumbled upon during a site visit. So Bethany, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you give us a little bit of context about this property so we can just visualize the space that we're talking about?
Sure. So this was a long time ago. This was, I want to say sometime around 2008. And I had not yet started the company that I'm at now. And so I was working for a family office that had a lot of office buildings, a collection of them, most of them mid-rise, kind of class B minus C properties. Nothing spectacular, but just your typical office. And they had just acquired a property and closed on a property that was previously leased to mostly oil companies. And it's about 6 stories tall, low ceilings. You can kind of get a gist for what it looks like. 80s
Lots of
building,
cubicles, the popcorn
remodeled.
ceilings.
Yes, remodeled in the 90s with the typical red granite, just the very stereotypical mid-rise office buildings. And so the property closed and no red flags or anything happened. And immediately after closing, I go and get a chance to meet some of the staff in person in order to take control of certain parts of the property. We were going to retain that staff, the maintenance engineers and such. And so we got to meet them, talk to them, and learn a little bit about the property. And one of them, you could see he was just excited to tell me something. And so I was like, what is it? He's like, I really can't, I want to show you the property. And I'm like, okay, sure. Great. Let's go. And he's like, I really want to show you the property. There's some fun things about this property that you don't know.
Is he nudging you? He's winking.
Yeah.
This.
And so he takes me and fortunately one other person, because we start navigating through the building mechanical systems, which is pretty normal when you take over a property and you're learning about different things. So he takes us up to the very top floor, and up at the top where the elevator shafts are, you walk in and it is dark, right? So you turn on these lights and it's hazy and dusty, and he walks us back behind the elevator shafts. And he's so excited to show me something, right? And he's like, you're going to really like this. This is the coolest thing you've ever seen. It's like, okay, he's really hyping it up. I don't know what this is, but we'll see.
What was going through your head at the time? You're like, what could this be?
I'm glad I wasn't alone, because I thought, this stranger's taking me up to the top.
Dark place.
No one knows where I am. And there's no lights and lots of blunt objects. So I feel like I'm going to be in some sort of a
plastic sheeting,
episode.
just like a set of Baxter. Yeah.
Yes. So unfortunately, I wasn't alone. I was with one of our other maintenance guys, and go up, and there is a piece of plywood leaned up against the wall, and it's just laying there. And he moves it, and there's a really cheap door. Those really cheap temporary apartment type doors that you could just kind of made out of cardboard almost, right? And he opens it up, and there's another door behind it. So I'm like, okay, this is getting interesting. This is going to be kind of fun.
Plywood, door, another door.
A real door, like an actual tangible door. I'm like, okay. And it was framed out and looked nice. And he opens it up and he lets me walk in first. And it took me a little while for my eyes to adjust, right? Because there's sunlight now. And we had been in the dark. And everything was a little bit hazy and covered in a lot of dust. But in it was a full apartment. And by full apartment, I mean a bar, a shag orange carpet with a sunken living room.
A sunken living room?
A sunken living room. Floor to ceiling windows with the blinds and everything. And I'm walking through and it smells like an abandoned apartment, right? And there's a full bar over here. None of the glassware or alcohol was still there, but you could tell it was very much a bar with a little sink and everything. You walk past through the room, there's a bedroom with a bed still. And then you walk over here and there's a full bathroom, like a nice one with a full stand-up shower and like really ornate and over the top. Like this is clearly a high-end bachelor pad hidden behind the elevator shaft on the 8th floor of a mid-rise Class C building, right? So I'm so confused. How did this get built? Why is it here? And what's the story, right? And I'm like, what is going on with this? And so he tells me he doesn't know. He doesn't know where it was. It's been there since he was there, but there was a lot of rumors. So I was like, okay, well, I got to know the rumors. What is it? And he said, well, the rumor is that the developer who built this building, while he was building it, went through a divorce and his wife got the house. And he didn't have, and this was also at the same time as the savings and loan crisis in Texas. So there was a lot of financial issues. He ended up moving into the building, supposedly, and had this bachelor pad built out where he entertained people and lived while leasing up the building. And so that is kind of the background of supposedly of how it happened, but it's still there to this day that I know. And we have no use for it because I'm not going to take people up there. I don't want tenants
not
walking
legal,
through.
right? You're not zoned residential.
There's no way. No, there's no way that that was allowed. So the whole thing was probably done in secret. But as far as I know, it's still there.
I love that the bar was empty, but the bed and the rug were still, they were like, this stuff is important to keep. I'm going to take the barware, though. I'm going to take the drinks.
It's creepy, but do you know it reminded me? There's that movie, I forget which movie, where they went down into a bomb shelter and lived down there because they thought that that they were going to be bombed, and so they lived down there, and this family lived down and like were frozen in time, and they had a full apartment in this bomb shelter in the 1950s with the old toothpaste and all their stuff and everything, and then they came out and emerged, and that's what I felt like. I was walking into a time capsule. Because it was also pristine and not as I'd expected. It was really quite bizarre. And that's
but it was very of the era. It sounds very like 90s in design.
Or maybe it looked like 70s, but it had to have been the 80s because the building was built in the 80s. So my guess is it was someone just with a little bit older taste. And
the sunken living room was the 70s.
The sunken living room was the 70s, but the building was built in the 80s. So that was kind of interesting. And they actually had to build up the floor to make it, you had to step up into the living room and then get back down for the sunken living room. So it was pretty awesome. It's
hilarious because they obviously put, like, this wasn't just, I just need a place to sleep.
Right. They were entertaining.
A little thought into this. I want it to be a vibe. I want it to have a bar.
Yes. My guess is at one point probably had like a disco ball up there or something. Like you could just totally see it.
It's too bad the living room platform didn't rotate.
Yes.
Maybe you didn't find it. Maybe I
didn't find the switch for that. But I thought, okay, but can you imagine what the contractors must have felt like as they were building this out? Like, what is this?
So you're managing the building then, and this is there, and you're just like, we're never going to speak of this again. It's just going to be building legend. Like, how do you make sure no one's using it?
We didn't want anyone up there because, this is up with all the mechanical systems. You don't want people walking in and out. It's not safe. So it really just became building legend. We talked about it, and every now and then, someone from corporate would come by and be like, oh, you got to see this. This is so exciting. And it was really wasted space. And really, I guess the only thing you really could use it for on a practical standpoint was storage, which we didn't really need. So it just maintained this kind of a cool, weird little time capsule.
Some funny thing that the next owner will get to discover.
We'll discover. Exactly. And what's interesting is I believe that property was purchased from the bank from the second owner. And so the prior ownership never even got a chance to give a tour to the new owner. So they may not know it's there.
I'm just thinking about all of the office spaces that are now being converted to, like, all of these Class B, Class C office spaces, right, that are being converted to residential now. And they're like, oh, we're like half done.
Right? You just have to be okay with walking behind the elevator and through this weird, shady entrance. So
yeah. Well, I have a very quick story about discovering the developer of a condo that I had bought into, living in the basement. Also a divorce. So it was her and her husband they kind of had a series of these developments, and they got divorced after this one. One day we were like, we're smelling a burning smell in the hallway, right? So we go down to investigate, and she's got like a little toaster, she's like set up a whole thing, living with her dog. in the
Oh my
basement of the building.
gosh.
And we're like, we feel terrible about this, but also this is a real hazard. Like you almost started a fire in the property. You cannot be living down here. Well,
Yes.
people fall into hard times. And then if you're in the development, you're like, well, I have access to all these properties.
Yeah. I mean, he had, 300,000 square feet of shelter. So he just carved out a little corner that was unusable otherwise.
That
I
is
can imagine him
so
hosting
funny.
some pretty interesting parties.
Do you think the staff ever did anything, or that they didn't go up there?
It was clean enough that I think they must have at some time, because otherwise you would walk into a space and it wasn't like it was sealed off with tape for 30 years. So there weren't any dead bugs laying around. There weren't any cobwebs around. It was clean enough that told me that someone at least goes in and tidies up every now and then, maybe even just to show it to me
tidied
or
up
show
for
it to
you
someone.
when you did your walkthrough.
Yeah, just because it's a fun story, but it was clean enough.
And that, now I know why the booze was gone from the bar.
Yeah, they probably, that was the first thing to go.
We're not going to let that go to waste. That is amazing. Thank you so much, Bethany, for sharing this story with us today.
Yes, for sure.
How can people get in touch with you? I know you're not going to share the address of this property, but if they want to reach out to you as an expert, how can they reach you?
Sure, they can reach me on LinkedIn. They can reach me on Twitter. Both are just my name, Bethany Babcock. And our website at the company has all of my contact information as well, which is ForesiteCRE.com. And that's Foresite with site spelled like site selection.
Perfect. Thank you. And that's today's episode of If These Walls Could Talk. Super is the AI-powered communication and workflow tool for property managers. To learn more about Super, visit us at www.hiresuper.com. And to share a story you have for a future episode, email us at hello@hiresuper.com.